Since we're in level 2 lockdown, one of the jobs we were able to do this afternoon was I was able to go out and get more welding gas. So I finished welding up the cover where it was cracked. It was cracked up in here. It's not a perfect repair, but it should be okay and it should hold oil. I've sanded it flat on the bottom. The welding got much easier, not only with new gas, but also when I realized that the AC balance setting on the TIG welder had gone out of whack. So I wasn't getting a very good cleaning effect when I was welding it, and as soon as I adjusted that, it suddenly started working a lot better. Obviously this sort of stuff is usually fairly dirty because it's full of oil, but it welded up okay. I need to keep practicing my welding. It's slowly getting better, but I don't do enough of it to really get enough practice to really get good at it. So every time I need to do one of these small jobs, it's kind of going through the same learning curve all over again. I came out to do one small job tonight, and I'm now stuck out in Big Shed in the middle of a thunderstorm. I'm not sure if you can hear the thunder or not, but it's getting quite loud in here. But my job for tonight was, I was looking at the head and I suddenly realized that the stud holes on the inlet side were not where I expected. There were 3 holes, one at the end, one in the middle, and one at the other end. And the other head, the one I took the inlet off, was the same. But the earlier heads are different. They've got the studs in the middle, like this. I do have a gasket. This is a gasket from the spares. And you can see that actually has both sets of holes. The manifold I'm using only has 2 holes. We'll turn this over. You can see it mounts through here and here. So what I had to do was I put the head on the mill and drilled out these extra 2 holes so that my manifold will fit. And what I'm actually going to do is plug these ones. I'll make little threaded bungs to go in these, because these ones actually break through into the waterways, whereas these middle 2 are where the oil returns from the head. So they're much safer, they're not going to leak. So it was easy enough on the mill just to drill these out, and then I tap them out. So now, hopefully, these studs are far too long, of course, but that allows my inlet manifold to fit onto this head. I should really check what's happening on the exhaust side as well. I think the exhaust is normal. It's got 3 studs. So that was one of those other little odd differences that I just had to fix so that this would all fit. The other thing is, I think I finally figured out getting hold of the steel to make up these. There's an engineering firm up the road, and that's actually the place I have to go to get my gas bottles replaced. But they do all sorts of engineering as well, including plasma cutting, and they can also cut some blanks for me off some 75mm diameter steel bar, which I can then machine up on my lathe. I checked they will fit on my little lathe. But the other thing they do is I can supply them with DXF files, and they will do plasma cutting for me. So what I'm going to do this weekend is things like these tab washers. I can take this apart and I can draw these up in my CAD program, and then I can get these plasma cut out of some probably 1mm steel sheet, so that I've got all the lock washers and things that I need. Today I pulled all of the valve guides out of the evaporust and given them a wire brush to clean them up. A few of them are still pretty grotty. These are the ones that are very pitted or very, very worn. One of them actually seems to be homemade because it's got a little collar on it. But I've cleaned them up and I tried to work out which ones were the most worn, just by testing them out on a valve and seeing how much wiggle there is, and also seeing if any of them have any suction. It turns out the ones in my original head are the best ones, but I only had 6 of those because 2 of them broke when I removed them. So I was going to use the best of the remaining ones, but I'm going to use the original 6, and then I realized, well, I've got a lathe, so I can just turn down the best 2 of the remaining ones to be the same shape as the originals. So that's what I've done. I just set the angle of the taper on the compound here, and that was pretty easy to machine. So I've just made up 2 of those out of the best of the remaining ones. This is one of the originals. And the reason I needed to do that is because I'm using double valve springs. So it's a spring within a spring. So you need the narrower diameter valve guides, because otherwise the spring won't fit over them. So that means I've now got a good set of valve guides. One of the people I know in the club has supplied me with a good set of exhaust valves that he's really nicely refaced for me. So I should have a good set of valves now. I just need to get the guides into the head, and I can check to see how concentric everything is, and see if I can just grind the valves in and make that work. I'm just going to clean all the cast iron off the lathe. One thing I may do is something I saw on Blondie Hack's YouTube channel, and on her lathe it looked like she had little plastic inserts that go into the T-slots here. So I'm guessing they were just 3D printed inserts, but I can basically do the same. I can just 3D print little plastic blocks that can slide in here, and they'll just fill in that gap and just stop it filling up with swarf all the time. I thought that was quite a good idea. I think the valve guides are going to work. What I want to do before I try and press them in there is freeze them. Ideally I'd do it with dry ice, but I don't know anywhere around here I can actually get dry ice from. So it'll just have to be overnight in the freezer. And I may heat the head up as well in the oven. But to press these in, what I'm going to use is my little block that I use for removing the valves. That sort of sits into the cylinder head like that, and just a big G-clamp, and then I can just sort of clamp onto them. And I've made up a little brass sort of pin, I guess it is, that fits down into the guide. It goes quite a long way, and just presses on the top so that when I tighten up the clamp, it's not going to be rubbing on the top of the guide. Should protect it all. So hopefully with that I can then squeeze these guides back into the head. The other interesting thing that happened this week is someone who watches my films sent me an email to say he'd seen these on Trade Me. They're period oil filters, but I'm not sure exactly when they would have been from. Maybe the 30s, 20s or 30s. There were 2 of them. One of them's empty, but this is what's inside the second one. There's just a sort of mesh, a gauze, that fits inside here, and a big spring that just keeps it pressed down. And then the lid, of course, screws on the top. And you can see there's an entry port in the top there that comes up from the side, and one in the bottom. And what I was wondering is there any sort of modern filter element that would fit inside here that I could use? I may need to machine up some kind of ring that fits on the top here, or is there some way you could adapt this to take some sort of replaceable modern filter? So that's something I may look into, just because these would look a lot better and a lot more period than a modern screw-on oil filter in the car. But even if I don't use them, they're quite nice little things. Another day. Weather doesn't look like it's quite as good as yesterday, but luckily I got all the outdoor stuff done then. At the moment I'm heating up the head in the little toaster oven, and I have the valve guides which have been in the freezer overnight, so they should be nice and cold. So I'm going to pull that out and try and get the valve guides into the head now. That ended up working pretty well. Ooh, that's still hot. I was able to push all the guides in no problem. They all seem to go in pretty well. They all look quite nice. And that's with a couple of valves in there. Everything still seems central and nice. I think I should be able to get away with just grinding in these new valves, new old valves. And nothing feels too wobbly. I'll have to go ahead and check all the rest of them as well, but that's good. I'm pleased with that. I think I will have to today, I'll go ahead and block up these extra holes. I'll just make some little threaded bars and screw those in with some Loctite to seal them up, and then cut them flush, I think. And then grind the valves in, and I should be able to assemble the valve gear. Well, the valves and the springs and the cotters, at least. But yeah, still quite warm. I think if I'd had access to dry ice, I think with dry ice to freeze the guides, you'd be able to just push them in by hand. They would just kind of drop in there, I think. But that's good. Another job done. One small job that might be good to do at some point is, now I know this works, make a neater one of these, but embed some magnets in it so that it'll actually stick to the head. It's just a bit of a pain trying to hold it while you're trying to line everything up, but a couple of strong magnets in there and that would probably just stick to the head and hold itself in place. As I've been using my little lathe more and more, I've been trying to make various improvements to it, make it more usable, like adding the threading dial. I've actually ordered a better tool holder, well I hope a better tool holder, to go on the top here, and more of these quick change things. I've got 3 of them. This one came off my mini lathe. It wasn't on it originally, it was something I bought from, I think it was from a little machine shop, and it worked really well on that. And when I sold the mini lathe, I actually kept it and put it on this lathe, and it works pretty well. But I'm getting one of the slightly bigger, I can't remember what they call it. It's kind of, it's got a quick lock for the tool holders rather than a bolt here and a simple dovetail. It's meant to be a lot more rigid, which is what I'm hoping. It'll just improve the rigidity of the small lathe. And the other thing I did today is something I've been meaning to do for ages, is replace the quickly modified with a hammer chip tray under the lathe with an aluminium one I made. It was just a good excuse to get out the folder and the bead roller, just to roll some stiffening ribs into the bottom of it. It always amazes me how much difference that makes. I mean, it shouldn't, I know exactly what's going on, but just putting in a simple pattern like that just stiffens up the whole thing no end. And unfortunately I did forget the saying about measure twice, cut once, and I did mess this up. Although actually my measurements were correct, it was when I added on the extra for the turn-ups on the ends, I somehow ended up with an extra 10 millimeters in there. So when I first made it, the bend was just on the wrong place and it wouldn't fit under here. So I had to unfold one end, cut it a bit shorter and refold it, which is why you can see the original fold line there. But that's now a much nicer full length sort of tray that fits in there to collect all the chips, which should make cleaning up a lot easier. Didn't quite get to grinding the valves in on the head. I kept getting distracted by things like my little lathe tray, and I've bolted the folder to the bench because it's always a pain when you're trying to fold something quite heavy and you're lifting it up, and the whole thing would lift up if it wasn't bolted down or clamped down. So I've shifted it over here and clamped it down. This is the one thing that's gone missing when we moved house. There was a handle on here, and the movers took the handle off and apparently put it somewhere safe, but I've not found out where that is yet. So it's just an M10 thread. So I might have to make up a new little handle for this, although the bolt seems to work. It's not too bad. I also just rigged up a little light in my little lounge area. I have a friend coming to visit at the end of the week, and we're always joking we should go to the pub. Unfortunately, there isn't any sort of pub around here that we could safely walk to and then stagger home. So we'll have to drink here, and I wanted to set up a suitable area for that. But one job I have done, I haven't completed it yet, but I've stripped the differential so that I could get the crown wheel on there, and that does fit. It's a bit tight. I think that's going to need tapping home. So hopefully I get the run out correct, because what you're supposed to do is set the whole thing up in V blocks and measure the run out on this. I guess you measure it on the back, and if there's too much wobble in it, you're supposed to try it in another position, sort of take this off, rotate it, and see if that makes it any better. So hopefully I get it right first time, because I've got a funny feeling getting this on and off here, because it's so tight, will be a bit of a mission. But at least it fits. And I've pulled off all the little tab washers, which I now need to go and model up in Fusion 360 so I can send the files to the plasma cutting people. These are really nice. They're obviously the original ones, and they've got made by ENV London stamped on them. But I don't really want to reuse them, and the reason is because once you've used them a couple of times, they get brittle and they break, and you can see that one's cracked all the way through. And you really wouldn't want that coming loose inside the rear axle and then going through the gears. So it's better to make new ones. This is one of the locking washers on the pinion, and that's another thing I can probably get plasma cut. I'm not sure how accurate that will be, but it's worth trying. I'm sure it's not a huge cost to get that done. I'll also give this a good degreasing when I've got it all stripped apart. I might as well, it's easier to do it like that. The other good thing is moving the folder gave me another flat surface to put things on top of, which is good. That's just there was another distraction, was my railway lamp. The power supply, I dropped it and it had broken. And I thought it was just one of the terminals on the end that had broken, but it must have shorted out or something as well, because the bridge rectifier in there had actually failed, so I had to replace that. But I think that was a good weekend's worth of work, even though I didn't get quite as far as I wanted. Um, we have been a bit distracted doing things out in the garden as well because the weather was nice. So, well, you can't really see it, but we put in the little trellis and the water thing. And on the other side of this garden, I actually built a little seat. That area is going to be a little courtyard when it's all done and nicely finished. But I think that's it for the weekend. And I definitely need to get a suitably cheesy lampshade for that bulb at some point.